Welcome to the Gray Range Podcast. My name is David Rousseau. We're going to explore the poetry of how we live, how we learn, and how we find our way along this strange path we call life. If you are curious about people, their stories, and all things savage and wonderful, join me on the Gray Range.
Well, might as well shoot it now. I'm not going to get many other chances.
There you go. So welcome to another episode of the Gray Range Podcast. And today we are here with Counsellor Chris Thiessen from the city of Grande, Prairie.
Yeah, nice to be here, guys.
So welcome.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much for making time for us in your busy schedule.
Well, we schedule it pretty far in advance, so it's easy to hold the spot.
Oh, that's awesome, man.
Yeah.
That's awesome. It's, we have a lot of conversations with local people, and local politics is something that doesn't get talked about a lot in Grande Prairie.
I think it should.
Yeah, I think there's some. I think there's a need for this kind of communication. I think it kind of gets lost in the wash when you're looking at provincial and federal politics, and when people really want to make a difference in their world, I think where they can start is at home. But I think before we get too far down that rabbit hole, we start every episode with a piece. I write something like poetry.
Oh, interesting.
I self-publish a couple of books in the last few years.
These ones behind me right here?
Yeah. So
cool.
This is my latest collection, Whiskey Painted Holocaust. And I've chosen a piece from this one that, I don't know if it's applicable or not, but I think it was somewhat hopeful, which I thought was kind of appropriate.
I like that.
And this one's called Daffodils. We watched the sky, complete in our expectations, warmed by togetherness, centered in our predilections, and the storms rolled in. The clouds built up, tall towers above the southern hills. Great siege engines turned black and rolling down the valley towards us. We sat, calm, sipping our whiskey and waiting patiently while the wind picked up. The sun was blocked, and soon the world became enrobed with darkness, purple like an angry bruise. But we didn't fear the violence. We expected it. We sat and watched the lightning play and heard the thunder roll. And when the strikes got too close, we picked up our glasses and we went inside. We put on an old movie and listened to the clash and clamor and the driving wind that stopped sometime overnight. After our morning coffee, we strolled out to the garden to see what, if anything, had survived the storm. The trees were unhurt, if bare by a few leaves, and the vegetable rows had picked up some debris that would require cleaning. But the daffodils were broken. Every stem snapped. Too beautiful and too delicate for such a tumultuous night. Casualties by fate or fortune, they lay down their yellow heads like soldiers who had died doing their duty. We tried to stand a few, but nothing doing. The force of nature's wrath had been absolute, and there would be no saving. We went back inside and finished the breakfast dishes, discussing what to do with the flower garden. We decided that we would just leave it, wait and see what fills up the space, now that the daffodils are gone. Something will come up. It's early in the season yet. Maybe something beautiful. Maybe more daffodils.
Nice.
Yeah, so I don't know why I'd write something about flowers, but I think when I read that recently, I saw maybe a little bit of what we're seeing now. Maybe a little bit of a storms on the horizon, maybe a little bit of that tumultuous time. And maybe some people are in that stage right now where they're coming out to see, what's left of their world or what's in the world left for them. And I like to think that regardless of where we are, there's some hope. There's some, still some promise that clean things up, figure things out. We can rebuild, we can replant, and the cycle of nature is always to have something grow back there, regardless of what it is. So I guess we can get right to it. Chris,
Yeah.
where did you grow up?
Right here in Grand Prairie.
Okay, right on.
Between Grand Prairie and Edmonton, actually. So,
All right.
So a bit of halftime between both cities.
Yeah.
But Grand Prairie was always home. I think I left in 1991, the end of 91. Came back in 95. Graduated at the Composite High School.
Okay.
Left again and left a piece of myself here. Came back in 2004 with a dream, and well, here I sit before you today.
Right on. What was it that brought you back?
Honestly, there's a combination of things, but really it was love, like a lot of things.
Yeah.
There's a lady here. And so, I went to follow my heart, but truthfully, I was trying to put together a music festival, kind of like a folk festival geared around local music, multi-genre. And I was trying to do that in Edmonton, and I just kept hitting wall after wall after wall. And it got to the point where you just have to say, well, I either got to give up this dream or follow my heart. So I followed my heart, and the dream came with me. And once I got back to Grande Prairie, it seemed every door opened up, and we were making music after that.
There's definitely a lesson there, right?
Oh, yeah.
You can follow your heart and keep your dreams.
Are you a musician?
No.
Okay.
That's the funny part of it.
What the heck?
Yeah, that was the funny part of it, actually. I didn't even really take much of a fascination with music at all. It was always something that played in the background. Every once in a while catch you at a moment in your life where you're like, whoa, that really resonates with me.
Okay.
Right. But when I caught the vision of, hey, I'm going to be doing this, it was just so real and so in front of me that I had to chase it. And, I kind of looked up at the heavens and I was like, well, I don't know anything about music, but let's go,
Sure.
And from there, I think it actually kept me quite innocent. I didn't have any tastes. I was kind of open to anything that got thrown at me. So when you're talking about local music, a lot of musicians trying to find their voice in the world and stuff like that. I'm a very poetic guy. I write my own poetry. In fact, I brought a little
Beautiful.
bit of the old scrapbook with some poems.
Hear a little bit about that later. That'd be awesome.
It was good. So I think it kept me open, and it kept me looking at everybody like they were a rock star, regardless.
Was it kind of was it the culture, like the music scene? Is that what you kind of wanted to? I don't know. You just enjoyed being in that, and you just wanted to kind of blow it up, or what was the?
Well, if you've been in Grande Prairie for any amount of time, you'll realize there's so many talented artists. It doesn't matter if you're a painter, a sculptor, musicians, and the music scene has ebbed and flowed throughout the years, like with and without me. And I just caught it at a really good time where we had some really talented people that were floating around, and they were actually looking for a venue, something to help them sort of jump off of, a springboard, so to speak, and to get noticed, to have their voices heard.
Yeah, Grande Prairie's always it's always suffered from a massive amount of talent and a lack of a venue
or exposure. Yeah,
the whole idea with any artist was that you always had to leave unless you wanted to toil in obscurity. I always thought it was interesting that somehow, we should have like a thriving like country music scene. One would assume.
Yeah, demographically, you would think
that we do, but we don't. We have a huge amount of folk musicians. We have one of the biggest folk festivals in the world in Northern Alberta, in the North Country Fair.
One of the best in the world. And
and there isn't like a deeply rooted folk music scene. It is kind of piecemeal throughout the Peace Country. But yeah, that's just one thing that's always kind of been absent. But we've never had huge backing to have venues. We don't have a lot of clubs. We don't have a lot of those kind of venues. Like we have Better Than Fred's does, their level best to bring in artists.
He's got a banging little corner there. Like he does a good job of bringing in a lot of.
John's really kept it alive, and I remember when it transitioned from the old Sharks Billiards into Better Than Fred's, and there's concern because there was talk that John might change that, and John, if you ask him, there was a time where he was thinking about changing it, and I remember I think it was like Labor Day long weekend, he decided to do two shows. One was like a DJ dance show, and the other was like a super rock show. And the DJ dance show did pretty good, but the Super Rock show was packed to the tilt, and you know, everyone in there. And I think John recognized that. He saw, you know, not only the talent that's here, so you can always sustain music, live music on your stage, but, you know, that people would actually pay money to go to a bar and watch that happen rather than pay money and just go dance like you could do everywhere else. Yeah,
for sure. I think right now, and I've said it on a few podcasts, there's very few places in the world that are as ripe for any venture as Grande Prairie is now. I think you'd be very hard pressed to find anywhere in the world where you could start a business or you could put something up right now and to start a venture and hit something at the ground level of something that's almost guaranteed to grow. You're going to have a lot of people moving in here. You're going to have a lot more interest than you have now. And they're all people from somewhere else who are used to having those things where they are, and they won't be here. So whatever you build will be the first one of its kind.
And they're filling the gaps.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So organizing the music side, is that what kind of got you into community involvement?
Yeah, that was definitely the open door. The first door that opened was actually, we really need this music festival. And so I was, I guess, turned towards the Center for Creative Arts. And so I went there and you know, they're all about the local artisan there. And even though music wasn't really their scene, they were willing to umbrella that. And from there, you know, you partner with street performers. Then I was partnering with the Grande Prairie District Multicultural Association.
Right.
And in our first year, we not only made like my festival, which is called Peace Starts at Home, but we combined it with Heritage Days, which was the first time in 7 years that it's been in our community. So once you start making those connections with people, you start sharing ideas. Soon my phone was ringing from the city. Anytime they had a community engagement, they wanted somebody who could spitball ideas at them, and so I would get that call, and so that sort of started, and my own ideas too, right? Like, you know, when you want to do something, you get out there and you connect yourself.
It doesn't happen any other way.
Yeah, you don't do it sitting on your couch. So
no.
And then when you realize there's such a great need in the community for so many different things, like you just said, anyone could come here and fill a gap. You know, same thing in the not-for-profit community. They're always looking for people who are willing to step up with them or for them, or, you know, and they do so much in this community anyway. So
yeah, we had a similar discussion with a gentleman from the Rising Above.
Yeah, Mel
Sigilco.
Yeah, he came on and I was talking about kind of where they came from and how they set up. And I think it just starts with that. It starts with that seeing a need. It starts with that, you know, if not me, then who? You know, somebody has to get in front of this thing and start leading it. And I think, you know, municipally, that there's a gap. There's a gap in leadership and people who are willing to stand up and say, I'm willing to put in the time and I'm willing to put in the effort, or I'm willing to sit through the fundraising meetings and all that stuff to get things started. Because I think when it comes down to it, there's a lot of people that love to talk. There's a lot of people that love to have fantastic ideas sitting around a table with a few cold drinks. And then when it comes Monday morning and it's time to get to that meeting, you've got, you know, if you're lucky, 10% of those people to show up.
And I would say my perception of the city is they do seem to get behind people who step up and lead. Like, they don't have a problem getting behind it. Like, you look at what Mel's doing, the city's supported him a lot.
Yeah.
Because he's a leader. So it seems like when somebody does step up, the city's behind them for the most part.
Well, 100%. Like, and we just saw this recently with the Kool-Aid Society. You know, they had some funding pulled and they came forward to City of Grande Prairie, and, you know, we already fund them a little over $90,000. But, you know, to lose that and to be offering the service that they do to youth, you know, and I think every member of council looked at that the second we heard about it, and we're like, okay, well, you know, we know what Kool-Aid does. It's been around since at least I was like 9 years old. It's been around a very, very long time. So, so they see that, and the citizens see that too. Like when they see people doing stuff, you know, I had, of course, the Peace Starts Home Festival underneath my belt, but, you know, it took me 5 years of just begging Municipal Park and the City of Grande Prairie, let me paint a mural on that amphitheater down in Municipal Park.
Yeah.
Let me paint a mural, please. And it was no for like 5 years. And then I gave up, and then my phone rang, and it was Municipal Park. And they said, hey, how come you haven't come in to talk to us about painting a mural on the amphitheater this year? I was like, because you guys said no the last 4 years. They're like, well, maybe we want to talk about it this year and we might have some money. You want to come down? And that's how that started. And next thing you know, we got a gorgeous mural painted by artists led by Tim Heimdall around the community and stuff like that. So I could put that out there as like a visual showcase for anyone who might have forgotten Peace Starts at Home, that, oh, well, this guy's actually doing other stuff too and making it happen, you know, improving the community.
Yeah. Well, I think if you don't bring it up, if you don't put it out there, then no one knows about it. And, you know, when it comes to funding, much like, you know, much we'll probably talk about is when people do have budget for projects like that, they want to spend the money. They want to get it out there because they want that budget next year. They don't want to have, you know, surplus. They want to make sure that that money's spent for what it's for, and it's not kind of just languishing, because then next year it's like, you don't need as much money.
Yeah.
Right. You have to spend the money. And if people knew that community involvement, you know, because a lot of people wonder, like, where does the money go and how does it get allocated? Well, those are questions that you can find out the answers for, and not just find the answers for, but you can get involved because you are a citizen, a voter in Grande Prairie. You can get involved, and you do have some say as to where that's directed.
Well, I think it shows the importance too of, you know, not being afraid to plant an idea, because even, you know, you planted the idea, and when you were ready to walk away from it, because you're like, well, that's not going anywhere. It doesn't mean the other people forgot about the idea. It's still propagated, and look what happened.
Well, exactly. You know, you plant those seeds. I think with those seeds, you have to nurture it with relationship though too, right? Like I would have never got that phone call if I was just a guy that walked in and said, hey, let's paint a mural. Let's paint a mural, you know. Working with the ladies down at Municipal Park over the years, making music festivals, making cultural festivals, you know, skate park showcases, stuff like that. We did quite a bit out there. So over time, when you build those relationships, you know, you can plant a seed in the ground.
Yeah.
It's not going to grow unless you give it water, maybe a little fertilizer, you know, maybe a bit of weeding every now and again.
Yeah. I think you're 100% correct in that it is relationship building. And I think the further down the road I get in life, the more I start to notice that it literally is all about building relationships. It's all about who I've met and what we've done in that time, and who I've chosen to build with, what directions we're choosing to go, who we're building community with. And I think where a lot of people get things mixed up is they think, well, I want to make a difference. And you know, if I had my way, I could go in there and you know, just tell people what to do. They think that's kind of what leadership is you go in and just tell people what to do. And it's like, well, that's not it at all. It's about building relationships so you can have everybody kind of generally moving in the same direction. So we all understand what's the purpose of what we're doing and moving in that good direction, and then keep people going in that direction, and doing that through compromise, through compassion, through understanding, through, you know, the one-on-one relationship, and then the bigger group dynamics and understanding how that works. You know, generally the person who's going to stand there and obstinately be like, no, it's my way or the highway, those are the people that don't last, because
they get stomped out essentially.
Well, everything moves on without them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and some people come in and they want to get one thing done. Maybe there's one really big thing, like in community leadership. So they run for council, they get elected, they want to do one really big thing. And maybe that doesn't happen. It's easy for a person to get jaded when you feel like you've been shut down from a lot of stuff. But it's that persistence, it's that relationship building, it's the compromise. There's lots of things that go into community leadership. Some people think that the mayor makes all the calls and the shots and we're just her loyal advisors. The reality is the mayor has one vote. So if she wants to get something over the finish line and bring it to the community, she's got to find at least 4 other friends on council in order to make that happen. So
actually, how many councillors are there in the city? I was going to ask this later, but since you kind of brought it up, I'm like, how many do we have?
Yeah, there's 8 councillors currently, and the mayor. So most councils, well, all councils, unless something happens. And we had that last council. Sorry, my hair is a bit of a fun mess here.
It's wild. It's wild, dude.
Well, thank you. It's
I love it.
5 years without a haircut. My gosh. So most councils will have an odd number, so that there's rarely a tie. Sometimes people don't show up. they're sick or they're away. Sometimes, like we had last term, Clyde Blackburn passed away. So, then we're down to 8 counselors. So everything dies on a tie. So it's good to have, that, that one extra, the odd number always makes for
and that's a lot of the time that's the mayor's prerogative, is to be that tie-breaking vote in some cases.
No, we're all the tiebreaker in some cases. It's kind of funny. Like if you look, if you have time and you want to look at the voting history, even just go down a couple budgets. Like I've been through 12 of them now, and there's so many things that live or die on a 5-4 vote in the course of, we're planning how we're going to spend our budget this year. We're planning service levels. We're planning an investment like a facility. So many things live or die on just one person, and lots of times when you look at it, like sometimes the mayor's on the losing side, sometimes they're on the winning side.
Sure.
Sometimes it's all about how well you debate your point. We're all supposed to sit at the table and be open to having our mind changed by new information or whatever's provided to us, right? Somebody says something, it triggers a new thought, new question pops in, you can ask that question on the spot, but it could have changed your mind. And so sometimes I've seen things, like I said, live and die on that. And sometimes I've been the swing vote, and I was voting one way when we got into the debate, and by the time the debate was over, my colleagues had made so many good points that I was like,
is there an example you can think of off the top of your head where your mind was changed in that kind of debate?
Oh, like
for a particular policy that jumps out?
Well, for me, I don't, I'll go all the way back. I'll go all the way back to my first term on council. So when I started, I made 10 promises to the community. If I get elected, I'm going to work towards these. And one of those promises was to reopen the leisure center. At the time, we had just opened the Eastlink Center. Mm-hmm. It was open for a few years, and people on the north side wanted the leisure center opened up. So on my first budget, or with my brand new council, we're all debating like the merits of whether or not the leisure center should go through. Well, that ended up going through on a 5-4, I believe, because Dwight Logan changed his vote. So, and then
the mayor at the time.
No, he was a councillor at the time. Bill Gibbon was the mayor at the time.
Right.
Yeah, and then years later, it was like a year and a half later, because after we made that vote, things kind of stalled. We didn't send our administration in to check out the facility, and then it eventually degraded. And
had some issues. I remember.
Yeah, we had like $3.5 million up to $5 million is what it was originally costed at, and then it was $14 million, and we were like, well, we could build a new pool for this. So I was still, I think, maybe stuck on my promise, and I wanted to bring this leisure center, and I was like, well, we'll clean it up. It's not going to cost $14 million. But we came to another budget vote, and so a discussion, what are we going to do with this $5 million that we budgeted for last year, but we obviously haven't spent it yet. And so the outdoor pool came back on. Right. And I was still feeling fairly stubborn about the leisure center, and so I wasn't going to change my vote, even though I could see maybe the writing was on the wall. Some councillors wanted to save money, and just scrap it all together.
Right.
At the end of the day, some of the arguments were so good. Helen's argument was good. Dwight poured on some passion, and next thing I knew, I was voting for the outdoor pool. Basically, you need that kind of amenity or some kind of amenity for the people on the north and east side, and at that point, they all had to travel to the south side in order to have those fitness activities, those swimming activities. So the course of debate, I changed that one up pretty good. Sometimes you see it where you think something's a good idea too, but as the idea sort of unfolds and administration presents it closer, you get hot or cold on the idea.
Sure, you don't see everything right off the bat. You start to get a little bit more informed, and that's a good thing. I mean, if you're having discussions that are that open, where you can allow your mind to be changed, one would assume that's the entire point of having the council.
That's the entire point of governance, right?
Yeah.
And things in this world are changing so fast all the time, and so and in building a community, like, things change really fast too, just a quick example. Like, I go into schools quite a bit, and I get to talk with elementary kids, grade 6, kindergartens, all that stuff. I love it. It's like the best part of my job. and kids, I was just at Literacy Week here, and a couple of the classrooms wanted me to talk about my role on council. And so they asked, like, well, how can we make a difference? And I said, well, you guys all have a voice. Like, you're not old enough to vote, but I mean, here's a story. So it was in 2016 at council, we had a delegation come in. It was a young lady in a wheelchair. And she came in and she presented actually quite well. And she told council that when she goes to the library, she goes into the bathroom. She went into the bathroom and she got trapped inside that stall because of her electric wheelchair. And the reason why she got trapped was because when we built the facility and they put on the stall doors opened inward instead of outward. So there's no way to really get out. You can get in.
Mousetrap.
You can get in, kind of close it. But then next thing you know, now, you've got limited mobility and stuff. So this girl at the time, I believe, was 14 years old. And so she came and told council this, and also that, our curbs didn't slope very well going into the library and stuff at the crosswalks. So right away, council and administration, none of us knew, right? But then when a 14-year-old girl in an electric wheelchair pulls up and says, hey, have you thought about this? We changed every stall in every bathroom across the city in all of our facilities, and we fixed those curbs. And I think that was done inside 2-3 months. So it was like big kudos to administration and big kudos to council for doing that. But the biggest kudo really goes to the person that made us all aware of it, which is the 14-year-old girl.
And that takes courage.
Yeah.
Right. To not just to put your hand up because everybody loves to complain, but to take it forward and say, no, I'm gonna do something about this.
Yeah, and make it better.
It's not like she could get out there and jackhammer those curbs and lay the concrete herself. Like, if that kind of courage, that kind of drive, maybe she would have, but she had to appeal to, to a higher power, had to appeal to the city to get it done. And to have that kind of bravery as a young person, I mean, that was part of what I was hoping would come from this conversation, is this idea that we're not powerless. People are not powerless. When we look at social media and we see what's going on in the world, it's easy to get overwhelmed. But when you want to look at what you can change, well, obviously yourself, you're in charge of your own life, your own health, your own, what you do with your time. And then bigger than that, your relationships with your family, bigger than that, your community, outside of that. But more and more I hear when people are frustrated with kind of the state of the world. How do I get involved? And more people are saying, well, get involved locally.
That's the best way.
Get involved in your city, because there you actually do, like you say, one vote changes how that budget could be spent, changes the direction of the community. And you're in that community. And I was looking today, we were 21% voter turnout in our last election, below 10,000 people.
And the crazy thing was our pre-election voting, like advanced voting.
Yeah.
It was like we set records with that. So we were all hoping and all thinking, hey, we're going to get 30, maybe 40% of our population coming out and voting. And when the numbers rolled in and it was pretty flat from the last election.
I wonder if that's a bit of a societal problem where people don't understand that they have that power, that they look at the government as like the government, like that's the title, and they look at it as like an ivory tower up on a hill with a big moat around it full of crocodiles, and they're like, well, there's nothing we can do about it. And I think the society does a poor job of educating people on exactly what they are capable of. Like, people have no problem getting on TikTok or Instagram or X or Facebook and ranting and raving about a decision that the government makes, but most of those people won't actually engage with the government. So it's kind of an interesting.
Yeah. And so where did you make the jump from local community organizing to your original shoestring budget to first of all, where did it come from? Did somebody come to you and be like, run for council?
Well, I'll say that probably came from two places. So the first person that really dropped that little nugget in my ear, maybe you should run for council, would be my ex-wife, Angie. We were a young family, and so I worked real hard in the restaurant business to save up whatever money I could to balance the float for festival season once I started promoting for free for the community. Right. And I don't think a lot of people understood that. I think the music community did. This was like, they got $100 a gig, which I told them that's going to replace your skins. That's going to replace your strings. But
maybe.
Yeah, there's no money in it. Yeah.
There's no money. And you know what? I'm doing this out of my free will and goodness too. And so there was lots of instances where that happened, and more people started asking for my help, suicide prevention. They wanted me to help them do a show. Red Cross wanted me to help them do a show. We were trying to promote the Center for Creative Arts because they're such good partners. So we're doing healing arts program initiatives and skate park shows and all sorts of stuff. So, I was putting in probably about good 40, 50 hours a week, food serving, bartending, making some good tax-free money and tips, I save it up just so I could do this for the community and then drain our bank account and go again. And so finally my wife said, well, have you ever thought about running for city council? And I said, no. I mean, government sucks. They're all corrupt. I think I was like probably everybody that has a negative view of government. And I mean, I'm a pretty positive person, but you see politicians make promises and break promises all the time. You don't have a lot of faith in that. And she's like, well, I don't know, and as I said, she played in a band with Wayne Ailing's wife. So she's like, maybe talk to Wayne. So I talked to Wayne. He thought it was, a long shot for a guy like me to get elected, which was fine. I was in my own hubris at the time, but I thought I'm going to take on this challenge because you know what, that could open up the door for me to be able to get my fingers into everywhere and do more good in the world. Sure. So like, she really sold me on that. And I was like, and at least I'll get paid a little bit instead of nothing, and 1 year I lost $40,000. And so doing the festival. So it's like, well, it's nothing, or, we're donating tens of thousands to not-for-profit, the not-for-profit world every year. And then I lose 40,000. And so it's like, well, this is a risk every year that we're taking. So, so I decided to run, and I thought, well, I've done so much. I think people just vote for me. So I ran my first election in 2010. I didn't put any signs out there. I think I just had little stickers that said, elect Chris T for your city. And we squished the T a little closer to the S. So it looked like Christ, because we're like, well, if we lose, at least it's a good sticker, right? And anyways, I came 190 votes shy of getting elected. And although it felt good, it also felt, I didn't think I would feel as disappointed for not getting elected, but getting that close without a sign. With only
if you've just been blown out of the water, you would have been like,
well, it was
a long shot anyway.
It was $100. I lost my deposit, but so it was really good. So I guess that sort of solidified it, and all my hard feelings, which were, I think I went through about 2 days of regret and anger, and then 2 days after that, the phone rang, and my mom was in the hospital. She had been diagnosed with cancer. So that's the direction that my life took for the next 2.5 years before I decided to try again and run, and lessons learned from the last time, with the old stage that had weathered from not doing music festivals, what are we going to do with this scrap wood? And so I just came up with a good plan to get a little bit of attention. We took the rotten wood and we repurposed it, made those 45-degree angle signs and the supersized A-frames, and had local artists and children paint them up, myself included. And
I remember those signs, because what year was that in?
2013.
2013.
And they're still here. They're still around. They're kicking on the farm, waiting to come out again.
Waiting for 2025, waiting for this year.
Oh, yeah. Well, win or lose, what I love about the sign campaign is, one, it's environmentally awesome. Like we've diverted about 2.5 tons of rotten painted wood from the landfill for, well, I guess now almost 20 years. So that's pretty good. We make the landscape a little more colorful during the elections. Nobody likes the chloroplast signs. And, we have so much fun painting those signs and washing them up.
I actually remember those signs because I used to drive from end to end on 84th Ave every day.
Yep.
And I just remember those big signs. I was like, well, there's something that stands out, like compared to all the other ones. So
yeah.
And the idea.
So many other campaigns, it's very cookie cutter what they're doing, the way that they choose to get out there, the way that they choose to present themselves. There's not a lot of variety. Like when you start seeing campaign signs, off the hop, like, can you tell if it's a provincial, federal election? Like, all the signs are kind of exactly the same. You know by the color roughly what team the person is playing for, but other than that, there's not a lot of, you're not getting any policy ideas or any personality out of it, really. Even the pictures, for the most part, are, they're like passport photos.
Well, except they're smiling. Most people are smiling.
Yeah.
Although John Lahners, God rest his soul, when he ran, I thought his signs they made me laugh every single time I drove by him, because it wasn't a smile and it wasn't a straight face. He had kind of like a crooked up-down smile, like only John Lahners could do. And every time I drove past his sign, I just smiled. And I'm like, I'm going to love this guy, I think. I've met him a few times with each of our roles, him in the school board and me on council, but never really got to know him. And I was like, well, that sign has sold me, like just on that funny face look that he's got on there.
So what was your first impressions? Like, what was your first year in council like?
Well, hold on. Before that, though, what was it like when you got elected? Like, once the votes started coming in, like, how did that make you feel when you found out the day of, like, oh man, I'm in? Like, what was that like?
Oh man, like, it was a total different experience in 2010, because I think I was in by about 40 votes, like after like 6 polls in 2010. So that was exciting. Then I fell out of it. This one in 2013, I started at the top and I just kept running. So I started at like 4th and I just kept going. And so for me, like watching my name go past like municipal luminaries like Dwight Logan and Helen Rice, and creeping up to Lauren Radburn. I remember my sister-in-law, Adelia, she said, Chris, you could finish top of the vote. And I was like, I don't want to finish top of the vote. And she's like, why? And I'm like, the reason why was because when we had the candidates forum, I went up to Lauren Radburn. Man, I have a lot of respect for him. I grew up with his son, and he's just an incredible human being. His whole family is. And so I went up to him afterwards, because I always kind of looked up to him, even though I'm about 3 inches taller than him, but, in that stature sort of way. And I said, hey, Lauren, good luck in the upcoming election. And he's like, oh, yeah, thanks, Chris, thanks. And I was like, actually, I take that back. You don't need luck to win this election. If you're not top of the polls by the end of this, there's something wrong with this city. So that was I don't want to be top. I don't want to be what's wrong with the city here. So,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So no, it was good. Actually, every time I've been elected, I'm always surprised. First time, finishing second to Lauren, that was really great. I was shaking and crying when the phone rang. I couldn't actually believe it. It's kind of neat. The second time I thought, oh, this is going to be old hat. But it was so fun. I was sitting at the curling club and Eunice Friesen was there. And so every poll, like Eunice's name was up and then my name was up and then Eunice's name was up and then my name was up at 1 and 2. And at the end of it, like she had won by like 3. And I was so happy for her that I cried. And then when I was driving her to City Hall, she's like, I don't know how I beat you. I don't understand it. And I was like, I think I know. And she's like, oh, and I'm like, well, this is your first election. So I'm willing to wager that you, your husband, and your mom all voted just for you. Mm-hmm. And she did one of these. And I was like, there you go. But, for me, like, I like to tell people, hey, this person's good this way, this person's good in that way. I like to get to know the candidates, especially after my first run. So when people come to me and they say, hey, who should I vote for? I usually ask that person, well, hey, what's important to you? So if, business is important to somebody, then I'm going to say, yeah, like in the last election between Jackie and Eunice, well, business is important to you, vote for Jackie. She's all business minded. Social issues, vote for Eunice, and so really it's again about relationship building and, you
want a cool rock party, vote for Chris, is that?
Yeah, well, I actually haven't done one cool rock party. All my election victories have been like
put that on your to-do list.
Yeah, maybe. And sit at home and watch the results come in and have a few people over for some food and beverages. And
the first time you got elected, was there a little bit of a feeling of like imposter syndrome? Like, oh, geez, I can't believe that worked. Like I shouldn't be here, or was it?
No, actually, I felt like there was a good There was a good role. So when I lost the election in 2010, the next day I got 2 phone calls. One was from Bill Given and the other was from Kevin McLean. And Bill Given said, hey, Chris, I'm sorry things didn't work out for you. I wish I had more time to talk to you last night when you can't stop by my celebration party. And I said, oh, yeah. He's like, but I hope this doesn't discourage you. Like, think about it. You didn't have any signs and you almost got elected. I hope I'll see your name next time around. Kevin McLean said to me, he called me, he's like, hey, bud, I just wanted to call you because I didn't know you from a hole in the wall. And I'm like, who does this guy think he is? And then your hand-painted signs, I didn't really know you, but apparently it looks like a lot of people know you. So congratulations. Sorry it didn't work out for you. I bet you next time it'll go good for you. And take that from a guy who's ran 3 times and never got elected and is now elected. And I was like, oh, well, thanks, Kevin McLean. So I had that. Okay. So, and I know Lauren was batting for me. Helen was batting for me. The Kevins were batting for me and Bill. So I felt like I was in a pretty good place. So did imposter syndrome? No, but I know when I got on there, when Bill and I talked in 2013 in the spring, he said, hey, if you could change anything in the city of Grande Prairie, what would you do? And I said, oh, we got to get the fluoride out of the water, like right now. Like, it's got to go. We can do that, right? We're in control of Aquaterra. He's like, whoa, Chris, I like fluoride. And I'm like, no, this is what we got to do. Like, and then we actually got in a big argument outside the Montrose Cultural Center. It wasn't like heated or anything, but we're like really getting into it, debating on the merits of fluoride. And then finally I think he just got frustrated and he was just like, you know what? I'm sure you got lots of other great ideas in there. Maybe think about those, and so.
Got to decide what hills you're going to die on, right?
Yeah, but when I came forward, with ideas, like I was like, we should have a more efficient transit system and we should give, kids 17 and under free transit. We should have an edible landscaping policy. We plant trees, so, at least 10 to 15% of everything we plant should grow food if we're talking about sustainability. Yeah. I came in and said, hey, we need to do social affordable housing across the spectrum and build more apartment buildings. And I got a lot of pushback on that one too, because municipalities at that time, we prep the land and we maybe contribute a little bit, but we don't try to lead housing issues, right? So yeah, it was a 1-8 on all of those issues. Fluoride included. So there was a lot of things I was bringing to the table when I first got elected. Out of the 10 things I said I'd do for Grande Prairie, that council was just like, yeah, no, that's too much. That's too much. But, again, building those relationships, we got everything over the finish line. Edible landscaping in my first term, housing became a top priority by the end of my first term. It was our top priority second term. You talk about transit, sometimes you got to wait. Sometimes everything has the time. When nobody wanted to talk about it and I get shut down at committee, I just had to wait for a few new members to come forward. And, Councillor Bressie, came forward, shared the same passion with me about getting more kids to ride transit. And, coming out of COVID, we were trying to find ways with barren buses to even justify the system. Yeah. So we asked administration to go away and drop a report, how much would this cost us? And previous administrations told us it would cost us millions of dollars to provide this service to kids. It cost the city $690,000. So when you're talking about a $200 million budget, we're just not collecting revenue off the youth. And hopefully when they turn 18, they'll keep using the service. And,
Well, again, it's when a huge chunk of your population comes from outside of Grande Prairie, moving into Grande Prairie as they move from smaller rural populations into the city of Grande Prairie. They don't avail themselves of that asset, that service, because it's not in their, it's not in their zeitgeist. It's not in their part of their day. Yeah. When you're bringing in people from all over the world to come and live here and to work here, because people want to come here, because this is a place where you can come to Grande Prairie, and I've said this a lot, is you can come to Alberta and you can start at the bottom and work your way up like one whole social class in a lifetime. You can start as the janitor for a small company. You can start your own business. You can have this immense amount of potential here, but people are going to need the amenities that they've had in other places. And transit is one of them.
Yeah.
It's pretty staple, man. You got to get people got to get to and from work until they can, they're going to start off, they don't own a vehicle, but they're still going to need a job, probably 2 or 3, and they're willing to work 2 or 3.
Yeah, and they're willing to
if
take
you can
the
get
transit.
them to and from.
Yeah.
Right?
And my hope is, I got my brother, Jeff, he's like 2 years older than me, but he's never driven a day in his life. I taught him to drive once, I think, in the parking lot of Commonwealth Stadium, and we almost got in a head-on collision. It was empty. But, he saw a car driving. He's like, decided to just nose towards it. I was like, oh my God, okay, we're going to stop this exercise. But you know what? He's never had the need to actually get behind a wheel, because if you've ever ridden the transit system in Edmonton, Calgary, Toronto, Winnipeg, I mean, I have, and they're pretty efficient systems. You can go 1 to 3 buses to get you most places, and it's pretty good.
Yeah. My daughter rides the transit. Like she goes to the college there, or whatever we call it now.
Polytech, yeah.
But the bus stop is like, I don't know, it's a 1-minute walk from the house, and she gets dropped off right there. Like it's very convenient. So I think when it's convenient, people will use it. It's, certainly if it fits their lifestyle.
Well, and we've definitely went out of our way to try to make it more convenient. I mentioned Dylan Bressie earlier before, but he picked up an idea from some of the smaller communities. Is the transit on demand. He picked it up from Beaumont, and so they didn't have a big enough town to justify a transit service, but they bought some small buses, and they said, well, we'll do transit on demand. People need to get places. So we brought that in, and, so now we use transit on demand for the late night hours and for out of service areas, just so everybody can have that access to transportation to get to or from where they need to go. The difference is they got to call ahead with that, whereas you could stand outside in -40 and wait for the bus to come by if it's in your neighborhood. So.
Yeah, even reaching out to, as far as places like Claremont and stuff like that, having that access to rural transit. These are things that bring, more assets into the city. People need to be able to get to and from, either to manage, a bank appointment, a doctor's appointment, get to a job. You can't level up in life if you're looking at it and you're like, I can't get there.
Yeah.
Right? I could have a better job, but I can't get there.
Yeah.
Right? You start to remove those kind of obstacles, and then people, they'll take those, they'll start taking those opportunities. They'll take those better jobs if they can get there on time.
No, they sure will. Yeah. And they'll take the transit if you make it convenient and affordable for them, right? Yeah. And I get buoyed every time our I want to call it operational services chief does his report, and every time he does, it seems like we have another bump in our transit numbers year over year, or, for adult ridership, for youth ridership and stuff like that. So we're seeing that it's actually getting used, not just by the young kids who are getting it for free, but by people who actually need it to get to and from work and to make a livelihood for them and their family.
Yeah. Yeah. We get so focused in northern Alberta on these big, sexy jobs. Mm-hmm. You see these energy jobs, these huge projects and this kind of thing. And that's where a lot of the spotlight ends up. But you've still got the overwhelming majority of people who are working service level jobs, who are working service industry jobs, who all those things still need to happen.
Yeah.
And those are the people who need to be able to avail themselves of city services to be able to get into these, like I said, maybe they're working 1 job, maybe they're working 3 jobs, but they need to be able to get to and from, and they need to have, good city-based transportation. For me, when I was a kid, I thought it was a novelty. I moved from a small town you could walk across in 15 minutes to Grande Prairie, which you could walk across in a half an hour. But still, taking the bus was a bit of a novelty for me. But you travel, travel around the world, and that mass transit is ingrained in that kind of urban flow of life, right? And I think if we have a city that's growing, you can't grow without it.
Well, we've navigated Tokyo on nothing but public transit of a bunch of different types.
So oh yeah,
it is an important thing. I wonder, and I think it's important too. I don't know if you know the number percentage-wise, of population in Grande Prairie that uses public transit, but you can also expect that as the city continues to grow, you have to have that infrastructure in place. So it's important to have it and maintain it. so that as the demand grows exponentially just due to, the growth of population, you have to have that infrastructure. You'd be foolish to walk away from it, let it collapse into nothing, and then be like, well, geez, now we got to build the monorail right through the center of town. Like you can't,
That has happened in other instances, right?
For sure.
But, and transit, like a lot of things, sometimes, you talk about service, and as a municipality, what do you want to do for your community? What kind of service levels do you want the community to have? Transportation service level is definitely offering people that opportunity to get from point A to point B. And so that service is important. I wish I had the numbers, as far as the overall population. I can tell you this, every youth from 0 to 17 has a free transit pass. So they can go anywhere in the community that they want. Their parents don't have to buy a bus pass for them. They can just ride the bus, and so that's available. So if we think about the population in context of 70,000 people, how many are 0 to 17? I'm going to have to look at my census data again, but I didn't bring that along with me.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's cool. A significant population. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So you are now, how many terms are you in for city council now?
Yeah, this is my third term.
This is your third
term. Coming
term.
to the end of it, yeah.
Wild.
And you still want to do it some more?
Yeah, why not? It's so good.
So coming into it from that first term to now, what are the biggest things that Grande Prairie is facing now, in your opinion?
Well, growth is number one, right? Well, how are we going to grow responsibly? I mentioned it earlier about the boom of Grande Prairie that went up until 2006.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So at that time, council's trying to squeeze in houses, and nobody wants to build apartment buildings at that time, right? So the development community, working with planning departments, they figured out a way where they can maybe scrunch houses closer together. That's that side yard setback that kind of got halved back in those days. I guess the concern for people when your side yards are too close to each other, or your roof is, if there's a fire, it could just jump to the next house away, quick and easy. So sometimes when you're rushed to accommodate growth, you get stuck in this pinch place where maybe not all the best decisions are being made at the time. They're made out of desperation. They're made out of, well, we need to do something fast. So I take great heart that we could have really broke down the budget and eliminated a lot of things during COVID. We did obviously lower a lot of things in our budget when COVID happened, but one of the areas that we had just built up that didn't get hit too hard was our planning and development department. And so our planners were tasked with making area structure plans, outline plans, planning for growth essentially, and the development community too. Now, it doesn't mean holes in the ground, but it means that's one, sometimes 2, 3, 4 steps down the line, where, okay, we've laid out where this needs to go, and like the utilities need to go, and where the sewage needs to go, and where the storm needs to go, and where the road alignments are. So we have that all done. So for a lot of undeveloped neighborhoods. So when the growth comes, when the time's right, which I think it's already here. I mean, we're less than 1% vacancy rate right now. So the growth's here. It's just, how do we grow responsibly? And I'm not saying that in the past that they grew irresponsibly, but I mean, in the 50s and 60s, like we used to dig up streams that were breeding ponds for fish that ran through the city. And we said, hey, you know what, if we dry that stream up, dam it up, then we can drop storm pipes in there, and we ran it through Highland Park, right up to Lions Park there. So that whole wide back alley used to be pretty much a river, a small river, a stream that fed into the Bear Creek, where the fish used to enter in from. And that just doesn't happen anymore. So, but you live and you learn, right? They didn't have any development standards back then. So they said, oh, we'll just dam it, and then we'll have a nice big long hole gully, and we'll drop storm in there. It'll be great. Yeah. So you live and you learn. So let's, hopefully we don't make some of the mistakes of the past, and we're prepared for growth. But yeah, that's one of the biggest ones. I'm not a fear monger. So some people might say, well, the U.S. might be a big threat to everything in Canada, but I don't know if I buy that just yet.
Yeah, I think that's
something that's kind of
the order of the day.
Yeah,
right.
The beginning stages of who knows where it goes.
Texas already has a Grande Prairie. They don't want another one.
They don't need another one.
Mm-hmm.
They got one already.
Yeah.
So I got to ask this question.
Yeah.
Is there a healthy amount of debate at the table then, when new projects are being discussed? Is there always that kind of that sober second thought about like the fiscal responsibility to the taxpayer?
Yeah.
Because we do live in a city with a lot of people would say the property taxes are quite high in this city.
They are.
It just is what it is.
You're second after Sherwood Park last time I checked.
It's very high. So is there I think people just want to know, is that being managed at some level of like responsibility, or is it kind of like the I don't want to say like spend like drunken sailors, like we're pirates, we're rich, bitch, spend it all, we got the budget, let's do it? Or is it kind of, or is there, or is there...
And much respect if that's what's actually happening.
No, I don't think that's happening, but you know.
I think sometimes that's the perception from people.
Yeah, definitely.
I just, like, obviously that's got to be a serious consideration for...
It always is. It brings up sometimes interesting conversations of how we do business too, right? Like, so this term we explored getting a stormwater utility model. Now, at the beginning, I think we all were on board because it was so romantic. You know, the city of Grande Prairie can find a new revenue source and it'll reduce taxes.
What is a stormwater utility model?
Okay, so we have runoff, right? So when it rains, right, and we have rain events,
every area that's paved or concrete catches water,
and then it'll run into the curb and it'll go down and then into the stormwater sewer where we have catch basins and other stuff like that to ensure that, you know, you don't get a lot of debris or contaminants getting into your river where it might be offsets, right? And so with the stormwater, we tried to manage this. I've always been trying to manage it biologically, you know, just using the landscape. Bioremediation is part of what it is. You know, you plant a tree, it's going to soak up more water, right? Yep. You have more permeable surface, it's going to soak up more water. You have more water going down a hard surface, it's going to, at times, overwhelm your storm system, like what we saw, I don't know, in 2016 when
it does seem like they built the Gateway Power Center and made this giant concrete area and maybe didn't think about, you know, our massive rainfalls that we'll get in the summertime.
Yeah,
sometimes.
Where's this water going to go? So these are huge systems. So, and we have to maintain it. Typically, we do that through tax and through like government grants that we get for like the GST and other stuff like that. So when we apply those to our infrastructure, that's just to make sure that, you know, nobody's house gets flooded and stuff. So there was this thing that was brought up that based off of this surface area of unpermeable surface of any property, you would pay a certain percentage off your storm tax. So it seemed like a good idea at the start, like when it was proposed. So it was proposed with, we're going to reduce the taxes. We're going to create a utility model, increase revenue for the city, get back our money that we lost from the province when they took the grants in lieu of taxes. Grants in lieu of taxes, by the way, is when there's a provincial property in a major city and they have like parking lots and stuff like that need to be plowed. So we would plow that. That comes at a cost to us, but instead the province would give us a grant in lieu of paying a tax.
There's a give and take there.
Right, because they don't pay tax on their provincial properties, right? But they have to pay their utilities. Yep. So this was a creative way to maybe try to do that. But the heated debate really came, I think, kind of early on, like when the school districts came in and they said, well, this is going to cost us hundreds of thousands of dollars, like based off of a permeable surface. And I said, well, most of our schools are built on green space anyways. We have municipal reserve that we put them on. We plan for these schools. Like all we need to do really is change the east trough, send it out towards the trees and the green grass, right? Yep. And it'll go in there. Kind of the pushback that I got when I asked that question was that, well, we own the municipal reserve. The school boards don't own the municipal reserve. So it's our land. It's not their land. And we're just measuring their impermeable surface of their building footprint. Right. And it was then that I realized, like, oh my gosh, this is sure it'll be a good revenue source for the city going forward. But I started looking at it like, man, you know, if this is going to cost let's say $160,000, I'm just spitballing a number because I don't remember the exact one. It was high though. It was high. And I go, well, if it's $160,000, we're talking about, you know, 2 entry-level teacher positions and a teacher's aide, or 5 teacher's aide to help with the classroom burden. Coming out of COVID, you know, and where kids were, I don't know, I'm going to say I'm going to say gaslit in and out of school because, one day you're in school, next day you're not in school for 2 weeks.
It was bad, man.
So, kids didn't have any stability, any grounding. And then they go into these classrooms, which, I think are already too full,
Sure.
and you can start getting into 30 kid classrooms like, well, it's too full unless you have help there. Right.
Yep.
So then you got to consider, well,
the optics. Now these assholes are going to tax the rain.
well, and that's what we got. We did get a lot of that,
Yeah,
but so I fought that, man. I fought that for a while because I made a motion at that council meeting to say, hey, let's just peel this out. Let's just make all of our school districts exempt from this utility. Right. And I lost that one. I think it was 8-1. And so then I just kept moaning and groaning and griping about it and picking it apart. And because sometimes you have to do that. Now, it would creating a stable revenue source for the city is good for the city, but it's not necessarily good for the taxpayer, especially when because assessment values are always rising.
Yeah.
They rarely fall. So that impacts your tax, which even when we reduced the tax in the past, with rising assessments, some people still got an increase on their tax bill at the end of the day, right?
I don't think I've ever seen a decrease.
No, it just doesn't happen. So now you're creating a utility model, which is the same thing. Have you ever seen your Aquaterra bill go down?
Heck no, it's probably doubled.
Right. You've never seen your ATCO bill go down, right? Direct energy. I think that's the highest bill out there for everybody.
Probably,
yeah. So it's just, you have to measure that because when we're building a community, you want people to feel like they're part of the community, not like they're being taken advantage. And in a situation like this, I'm not saying council wanted to take advantage of the community at all. It was an idea to help the organization of the city of Grande Prairie and to hopefully lower future tax increases. But at the end of the day, I just kept measuring it against how's this going to impact our schools? So if the Grande Prairie Public School District, for instance, has to pick up $160,000, they got to lay off a teacher or two. You can't hire anybody. I said earlier, well, we could hire these teachers, but no, now you got to make up that difference because is the province going to be like, oh yeah, we'll account for that in this year's budget? No, it usually takes about 2 or 3 years for it to register there, and then that gets built in their future budgets, right? So I don't know. The way I look at it is sometimes the decisions we make on a local level have a huge impact on community well-being and on the grand scope of things when you look at it all holistically. We're all intertwined.
Yeah, absolutely. How did your view of city council and your place in it, how did it change kind of pre and post pandemic? Did you start to see more importance in what you were doing, or did you guys see yourselves as being kind of overplayed by our provincial and federal governments on that?
Oh, geez. This is probably a question you'd have to ask every individual member of council because I was definitely an outlier during that time. I challenged the narrative. There's lots of holes in the story. I saw some cracks. I did extra research. I even did citizen science. So I mean,
whoa. That's not allowed.
Citizen science?
You can't just do your own reading.
Well, yes. Well, that's what we're supposed to do, No, I think most of us on council, myself included, we really wanted the health system to come forward and give us something that we could go with. So we made an ask to Alberta Health Services to come and visit with us and talk to us about the pandemic in the middle of this pandemic. It took 8 months for them to actually walk through the door. It was actually 2021 by the time they walked through the door. And we asked them all the tough questions. I think I asked them a lot of the tough questions. But you know what? I think it got to a point where, all of us, regardless of what we believed, I remember sitting with Wade Palat after Alberta Health Services was in. I think it was January 21st or 27th when that meeting was. You can check the minutes. But when I looked over at Wade and I said, Wade, we need to make the biggest motion ever, but you need to make it. And he's like, oh, yeah, okay. Because I figured if it was coming from me, the outlier,
right?
I wasn't going to...
Here goes Chris again.
I wasn't. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I said, so Wade's like, yeah. What do you want to talk about? Like, I was like, okay. So we wrote down a whole list of things, like how many suicides happened in Grande Prairie? How often was our emergency room full during the pandemic? Mm-hmm. What's our typical times? What are the causes of death for Grande Prairie from the year 2018 to today? Like, and how many people died? How many overdoses? Like, we just listed it. It was the longest motion ever. And really, we imagined it wasn't going to go anywhere, but it was just like, you keep asking questions and you're getting half answers, and the health community is not stepping up. They're encouraging you to make the rules, but they're not taking any responsibility for the rules that you make.
Right. Or really providing any great information. That's one of the things that I've hit on. It was so hard, and I think still to this day on that topic, it's so difficult to get real information as to what it was. I think some conclusions have been drawn now that were different than what we would have thought 3 years ago. But for somebody who's in charge of, part of this council, where it's your job to make decisions for the city, that had to be really, really difficult to do, not being able to get great information from the people who are supposed to be giving it to you.
Well, that was the craziest thing, because we didn't, when we made that motion, we didn't actually ask Alberta Health Services to provide us the information. We went right to the Ministry of Health, and we asked Minister Shandro for that. So that's where the motion directed it to. And like I said, we didn't think we were going to get anything, but honestly, like 3 months later, we got everything. We got all the stats. So it's kind of interesting to be able to lay out on this document and look at, okay, how many people died due to COVID in Alberta since the start of the pandemic. According to the Ministry of Health, there was 4 in Grande Prairie. 4 people died. That's in the city of Grande Prairie minutes. You can go find that. But at the time, the media was reporting that we had over 40. I believe it was 42 at the time.
Yeah.
So that's like a 10 times difference of the severity of the people who definitely died with COVID coming directly from the Ministry of Health. And we got everything that we asked for, from how people died from 2018 all the way up to 2021 at the time. So it was actually quite cool. So to be able to provide those answers, but then once you have it, like, everything was so, it still is a little bit polarized.
Yeah, you have the answers, but now what do you do with
now
it?
What do we do with it, right?
Yeah.
How do we socialize this into the community without coming out against the health people, right?
Exactly.
And or the government that sustains us and that binds us through the Municipal Government Act, right? Like, so these are weird things, but it's definitely through that, this is where community leadership really comes in. Is I talked about edible landscaping before, and so we had already created the first ever of its kind edible landscaping policy in the world in 2014, and so there was a bunch of spitballed ideas that I'd thrown around with administration, and Michelle Gardner, bless her soul, she's so great. She still is. Yeah, say hi to her at Esquires at the Montrose Cultural Center. She's enjoying her retirement, still working, just because she has to. She's got so much good energy. Anyways, she saved a lot of the ideas that we spitballed. So during COVID, that's when our CAO called me up one day and said, "Hey, Councillor Thiessen, we got all these ideas from your edible landscaping. I want to do something with it. I want to talk to you about some things that I've circled here." And I was like, "Okay." And he's like, "What is this seed program?" And so I was like, "Oh, well, we would just buy a bunch of seeds and give them out to the community and maybe post something online about how to grow those seeds for people who'd never grown anything before in their life."
Yeah.
And he was like, "Oh, okay, I like that." And so he said to me over the phone, he says, "I think we're going to do something with this because we have to do something. And I want you to be the face of it," which is a weird place because we already had Mayor Given, right?
Yeah.
Right. But it was my idea. So he wanted somebody who could speak to what we're doing, why we're doing, and how we're doing it. And then we created GP Grows, which to this day is our most popular program. We have over 5,000 people take us up on that seed garden program. And, through it, we've planted so many orchards across town too. Like, I think we have at least 14.
That seems just like, to me, if you'll excuse the pun, it seems like low-hanging fruit.
It is.
Right? It just seems like one of the, we could grow ornamental trees downtown, or they have these, city beautification projects where they'll have hey, plant flowers, we'll give you flower seeds to plant in the front of your house.
Yeah.
Why don't we have a Grande Prairie Grows competition where you have, people plant edible food, and then it just seems like, especially in something like a situation where we have with COVID or any other major natural disaster, or maybe a trade dispute with our southern neighbor or something like that, where why aren't we providing more of our own food security in whatever ways we can, and instilling that in the community so people aren't, it's not just a foreign idea that, hey, yeah, you can drop some seeds into the ground, and obviously we can't for like 6 months of the year, but for the other 6 months of the year.
But I disagree.
There you go. I like it.
And I disagree, because I think we could probably grow food year round.
I have this idea where we have these massive Quonset huts.
Well, there is, like, if you look at like Money's
round.
mushrooms and some of these other greenhouses in Alberta, like it is possible to grow.
Yeah, you can heat it with geothermal, and there's definitely ways to do it.
100%. And one of my ideas, and the mayor actually, she ran with it in her election campaign. It's one of those things that I haven't seen yet, but I got real excited about it because, I was part of that idea, I think, was having industrial-sized greenhouses in order to take care of our needs here. Where I see maybe food, so here's how I look at it. I created my own thing. I said it's sustainability through community design. So that's what I try to achieve in my role on council. So how do I define that? In the past, and still today, people would say sustainability. Most people say sustainability is about the environment, or it's about the economy. A lot of people will say that, like they'll put leverage into one, the other, or both.
Right.
What I was saying back then, I still say today, is sustainability is your ability to meet the needs of you and your population now and in the future. So how are we doing that? Like, we plant a tree for its shade tomorrow. We plant a tree for its fruit tomorrow, right? Like, it's not going to happen overnight. It's just like houses. Justin Trudeau can throw an accelerated housing fund and billions of dollars out there. But you know what? It's been around for a year and a half now, and we still don't have one unit built out of accelerated housing funding dollars.
Well, that money all gets siphoned off, man.
No, it doesn't. I don't believe it does. No, I don't believe it does. But here's the thing. Some of it might.
Whoa. So you're saying, I would argue that. I'm not going to argue it here forever, but
let's do it.
If the government has a program, by the time I think it's like any other program they run, there's too many hands in the cookie jar. By the time it actually gets there, I'm not saying that none of it gets there, but there's a percentage that disappears. Like, you look at when what's her name, Catherine McKenna, like, there's still, was it
a lot of money?
It was a lot of money, and it's missing, and that was all infrastructure.
Yeah.
Right? Where's that money? Nobody knows. They still don't know. So all I'm saying is that Justin Trudeau, with his Housing Accelerator Fund, the good idea, ferry strikes, okay, cool. But yeah, there's nothing there. And all that money, where did it go?
Well, yeah, and you can throw money at whatever, but it's not when you're talking about growing a tree, or you're talking about building a house.
That's it.
It takes
Remember
time.
how many trees he was going to plant? How many billion trees?
That was a stolen election promise when he first got elected in 2015, because he lost because he beat the tree planter.
He has still planted no trees. Right?
Yeah, I mean, we could sit here and beat up on Trudeau all day, but I mean, I think it's interesting when you talk about, what it's actually taking to get shovels in the ground.
Yeah.
What it's actually taking to make something happen. And I think this is where people, they lose the romanticism when you're seeing, the media, which is, I did an AI search today on how much of the Canadian media is funded or in some way, shape, or form by the federal government. And I did it through X, through Grok, because it's the newest and fastest AI. And it said effectively all of it.
Yeah.
Effectively all media in Canada is in some way, shape, or form subsidized and or paid for by the federal government. So, I mean, part of the reason why I started this podcast was I wanted to talk to people in our community. I wanted to talk to people who are from here, because that's the real story. That's who knows. That's who knows. When we talked to Lucas's dad, he was a lifetime Alberta forestry firefighter.
Yeah.
We want to talk about wildfires.
Yeah.
We talked to somebody who spent a lifetime fighting wildfires. How did they start? Because we only get part of the story in the media. And then when you look to social media, everything's got a little agenda or a little twist. Everybody who's posting something's kind of, they're there for their dopamine fix, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when we start to have these conversations, we get a little bit more tuned in, or at least the real story from that person's perspective, and we get outside of that filter of media. And Grande Prairie doesn't have a lot of that anymore.
Well, we don't have a newspaper anymore. That's for sure.
No, I found out today that they still have a website, which I was kind of surprised about.
Yeah, they do. Yeah,
but we don't have a lot of that destiny over our own information. We can't curate our own story. And my concern was, if we don't tell our own story, someone will tell it for us.
Right. And I think that's why it's so important that, shows like this exist, where people can share their perspectives, share their voices, their stories. That's how we learn and grow. And that's how, the world evolves, changes, and grows itself. Right. When I was younger and I started getting a bit, I'll call it conspiracy minded, as post 9/11.
Sure, we all go through that.
Yeah.
I'm still there.
Yeah, me too, a little bit. But when I was there, what I realized is I worked at Boston Beach Jasper Ave, so we had always 4 newspapers kicking around because somebody brought in like the Globe, the National Post, the Edmonton Sun, the Edmonton Journal. And what I noticed reading the articles, like post 9/11, the war articles, is I would get something out of the Sun. I'd get pretty much the same stuff out of the Journal, but something's different.
Yep.
And then a different perspective from the National Post and the Globe and Mail, and also other opinion pieces too, right? And so then I realized, I was like, wow, there's always more to the story than just that soundbite, that headline, that article that you're reading. And so I had a healthy distrust for media, like especially post 9/11. So I consumed a lot of it. Even to this day, I still do, because I want to know what's going on in the world. Because sometimes what's happening in the world is going to impact you right here at home.
Oh, absolutely.
With respect to, like, not to beat it to death, but let's say that Housing Accelerator Fund, even if it did materialize and the federal government had everyone's best interest at heart, is there too many barriers in Canada to actually get that to the municipal level? Like, does it have to go through the province? And if it does it get bogged down even more there? And does it by the time you get the end product, so it is a good idea and concept and we need this money. Is it by the time it actually gets here, is it so diluted that it doesn't have an impact? Or
I don't know. So the Accelerated Housing Fund's a bit different because this is federal government straight to municipalities, right? Okay. So this is where I guess our premier has had a bit of contention with it. And the reason why that is part of the Accelerated Housing Fund is they want to increase density. So this is the federal government's opportunity to influence land use bylaws in municipalities across the country. So that's why you see the cross blanket, zoning of eightplexes in Calgary, for instance. Is that there's part of that agreement, but there's other things too, which is how they evaluate it, right? Like, is it close to transit? Like, do you have high density places? Are you going to be building these? Grande Prairie is kind of at a bit of a disadvantage, I would say, one, because we got a great transit system, but it can be more efficient, and we got to definitely get more ridership up. And when it comes to density, we're still working on that. Like, we've gone on the suburbia footprint for a long time here. We haven't built
ending up like Calgary with this massive urban sprawl, right?
Right, and we haven't built a new apartment building, like big one at least, since 2015. There's one going down Smith Sub that Grand Spirit Foundation is working together with the Atkinson Group, but that'll be the first one since 2015. So that's a decade without one brand new apartment building.
And our population in the last decade has increased by probably 15,000, 20,000.
Yeah. Well, by the time it ebbs and flows. Right now we're at about 70,000. So when I first got elected, we were at 62,000.
Okay.
So, yeah. Yes. I'd like to say we have more, because when we have more population, we get more money from federal and provincial grants.
For sure. I got one quick question.
Sure.
I was reading your bio. It said you were the vice chair of the Mighty Peace Watershed Alliance.
No, I am actually the chair.
Oh, you're the chair of it. Okay.
So I'm glad you read my bio. So I'm going to say this to anyone who might be watching.
I was just curious what that even meant. So,
okay.
And what that is, what is the Mighty Peace Watershed Alliance? And I was wondering if that kind of influenced, because you're talking a lot about the surface area and the rain and all and growing and stuff. So obviously you have a pretty keen interest in that.
I do, definitely in the environment, social justice issues, stuff like that. Mighty Peace Watershed Alliance is a watershed planning and advisory council. So we're mandated by the government to exist. There's 11 WPACs across the province. The importance of the Mighty Peace Watershed is vital to the entire province. When you look at the flows of what comes out of the Peace River and how it impacts all its tributaries and other rivers and streams, downstream, upstream, 69% of all the water that flows through the province of Alberta comes from the Peace River.
Okay.
And
I didn't know it was that much.
Yeah, we're close to 40% of the land footprint just for the area that Mighty Peace Watershed looks after. So we have a small but mighty team, I'm sure there's going to be some twists and turns moving forward because the province, they've made it pretty clear that they view water as a commodity resource, right? So they have a whole new division that they've created called Water and the Circular Economy. So, when you talk about what's important, we can't advocate to the province. So we advise. So we look at the landscapes. We rely on local knowledge keepers. We're a multi-stakeholder consensus board, which means everybody has to agree, which can be tough when you have First Nations groups, oil and gas, agriculture, right, large and small urban forestry. Yeah, they're all there. So, and it's been a great group to really work with, and the work that we do is incredibly important for the future. But when we look at the now, there's so many things that are happening that are coming to maybe impact the Peace River. They talk about small modular nuclear reactors on the Peace River. Yeah. There's that talk. There's the lithium project that's extracting lithium from the bitumen under the ground, like between TP Creek and Peace River. Yep. We talk about Site C Dam and the fact that the British Columbia government and the operators of the dam are in charge of the flows and the regulation, so that impacts the Peace River. Yep. So we have to, and same with the Bennett Dam too. So we have to watch those things. And then when we talk about this AI data center, the Kevin O'Leary project, that's coming on. So that's going to require some water. I say some water because I've heard different things. From
the power generating always requires water.
Right. But from what I've heard is they're just going to flow in about 0.2% of the Smoky River into, and then it'll be contained, and then it'll steam itself up, condensate, drop back down. And so they'll have that constant cooling there. So that it's not like they'll have to redivert the river to flow in there, or that they're going to have to constantly keep capturing water, but more to be explored because obviously this is just the very beginning phase. But there's lots of inputs that are coming. So
that's wild. Okay, are we as a city dumping fluoride back into the water? How much fluoride are we getting? Did you win that battle?
No, I lost that battle actually.
So we're drinking it.
Yeah, we are drinking it. It's interesting because. I believe it was 2015 was when the vote came forward for us to get fluoride out. That was my first term on council. I think only Jackie and I voted to remove it, and the rest of council was fine with what it was. We had lots of pushback from the dental community, which is fine. Mm-hmm. There's new science that's come out now pointing out that it's a neurotoxin. But to answer your question, it's 0.7 or 0.07 parts per million, right? So it's a very small amount. But when you look at the new science data,
small amount of neurotoxin.
Yeah, just a small amount of neurotoxin, just to make you docile. Yeah, I don't want to scare.
It's just a little bit of fentanyl. Don't worry about it.
Well, and here's the thing: is the whole process is, it's an interesting process because one, it does have an impact on your brain. It does have an impact on your bones. It does have an impact on your soft tissues and your internal organs. So those are questions that went unasked or unanswered. I asked them back in the day. They went unanswered. People didn't have an answer. The other one is kind of similar to what you just asked, like how much fluoride are we pumping back in the river? So Aquaterra is always saying, hey, the water that we take in from the river, when we put it back, it's cleaner than it's ever been before, which is okay, but you need some of the stuff that's in there too. You can't just
minerals and sediments
and organisms and stuff.
Oh yeah.
But the reality is that when we clean it all out. So I was talking with our in our environmental department he's now our parks manager, Case DeVries, and he went to school. He was a chemist, and so I wanted to talk to him about fluoride at the time, and he said, "I love fluoride. It's great. The whole water fluoridation process is amazing from a chemist standpoint." I'm like, okay, explain it to me. from a chemist standpoint. And he said, well, the cool thing is like you have to boil it. So you boil it to a certain temperature, and then the fluoride molecule binds with the hydrogen molecule. So then you have essentially what would be H2FLO, right? So you have that. And so then it's there. And I'm like, wow, that's really cool. He's like, yeah, so like this process works. And then they skim out all the other stuff because it's just the ions that bind. And I said, oh, that's really cool. How did they get the fluoride unbound? And he was like, what?
Yeah, why would we do that?
I'm like, what is the process? So he didn't know. So when Aquaterra came in, when we were talking about fluoride, I asked him, I was like, so what is the process of unbinding this? And they're like, oh, well, we figure when we let it out that it just goes down the river and just naturally unbinds when it hits the rocks. And I'm like, so what essentially you're saying is we're putting this water that's cleaner than it's ever been before, but at 0.7 parts per million more fluoride in it. So has there ever been any downstream studies on the impact on the fauna, on the bugs, on the fish, on the water quality?
Yeah, the whole biome.
Like algae, like algae growth.
Whole riverine system.
Have we ever looked at this over a time horizon of 40 years? Which I knew the answer was no. Like Aquaterra's only existed since 1999, right? But they didn't know. So that's the problem, is without even putting it into consideration, we could be forever changing the landscape just by pumping in this, essentially, it's not just a neurotoxin, it's bio-waste, right? So back in the 80s, when we used to have acid rain out east.
From Detroit.
Yeah, and all through Eastern Ontario, Windsor, and all that.
Yes, there's a lot of industrial out there,
Yeah, and I remember being a kid, I was so scared of acid rain. And
you know that Bill Murray movie.
Yeah. You know how they changed it? What Bill Murray movie? Wait.
Scrooged.
Oh, yeah.
They had the like hard hitting Christmas thing. And like acid rain was the thing. People are like running the streets burning.
Yeah, and
that's what I thought it was like.
So we solved that problem simply by putting scrubbers in the smokestacks of the steel smelting plants. So when we do a shutdown of those steel smelting plants, they take them out, scrape them all off. We put them in radioactive drums. They put the cap on. And now either they have two choices at that point. They can pay millions of dollars to properly dispose of this really toxic waste, or they can find a way to repackage it, repurpose it, and sell it to municipalities, make a profit, and then we just get rid of it for them in our water supply.
Yeah, there's that.
Interesting.
There's that. Some of the best cleaning agents are just like toxic waste that fell on the floor. And like, man, that spot's really clean.
It looks good.
Look at that. Bottle that up and sell it, man.
Yeah, man. Well,
and I'm glad you're there asking those hard questions.
It doesn't always go. It doesn't always lead to the results you want, but you know what?
Well, somebody's got to ask the questions, though. Somebody has to be there to do it. So.
Yeah, and eventually someone's going to make something like that happen, right? And so what you do is you just keep bringing it up, and hopefully that knowledge sticks around for a while.
That's the functions of industry to make money, right? And you know, all the power to them. I'm not a staunch capitalist, but everybody's got to make a living, and I think that it's up to, you know, public servants and stuff like that to work in business and to realize, hey, look, this is how they're going to come at this problem. They're going to come at it as a profit problem.
Yeah.
And it's up to other people in the community to step up and say, okay, but how does that impact our community?
Yeah.
You know, sure, we want jobs. You know, we want industry because we want jobs. We want people to have, you know, stable incomes. We want to grow our communities. And we do that by growing our capability. But how can we do that in a way that's not going to downstream affect future generations or the environment? The environment's going to affect future generations no matter what, right?
Right. And you know what? Here's the thing is like, I believe that the environment is very resilient. And as an environmentalist, I think we have a responsibility to treat our environment properly, manage it properly. That starts with the air, that starts with the water, the land, and definitely how you treat it all. But at the end of the day, you know, for people, like we do have an impact, but at the end of the day, humanity, if we keep negatively impacting the earth, it's just going to shake us off like fleas. Right. Well, and then it's going to regenerate itself, whether that takes millions of years, thousands of years, or hundreds of years. It will still regenerate itself because the earth is resilient in that way.
Absolutely. I think, you know, human beings are amazing creatures, and I don't think we've reached anything near our potential. when we look at problems like this, I think that there's a lot of opportunity there. There's a lot of opportunity for applied science. There's a lot of opportunity for, education, where we look at the generation coming and we say, hey, we can't maybe solve this problem yet. Maybe our technology's not there. Maybe we haven't quite cracked that nut. We've got an idea what the problem is. So if we get a lot of information to study that problem, the next generation, someone's going to come along and go, oh, just do this. And there we are.
Simple and easy. Yeah.
I think there are opportunities for growth. I think there are opportunities for new things to happen. And I don't think they're the end of the world problems that we think of. We think of like how we extracted minerals or oil and gas 50 years ago to how we do it now. If we looked at how we treat water, my biggest concern at this point is, are we doing enough to maintain what we have? Are we doing enough to maintain the infrastructure that we have? If our electrical grid is browning out in the wintertime because we have too much demand from cold weather, or in the summertime because there's too much, a lot of heat,
AC,
too much demand for that. Like, are we doing enough to build resiliency into our systems so that if it comes to a time where we have some kind of massive natural disaster, or we hit some kind of giant inclement weather, or we have growth, can we do that? Can we tie into that? That's why I'm thinking, like, we should probably be paying more for electricians, more people to work in the sewage treatment plant.
Yeah.
I think that's a really important thing that we need to be looking at.
Like water operators, it's a high need, especially in the north, all across, people who don't have ways that they are living off of pretty much dugout water.
Yeah.
Some people can live off dugout water and it's very fine, but it also exposes you to a lot of other things that might be present inside that water as well.
It's kind of part of that sustainability you mentioned earlier too, is having a robust.
Yeah. So how do we build this into the structure, right? So something like edible landscaping, right? I look at it like, okay, well, we could build industrial sized greenhouses, but maybe there's an advocacy piece there too. Like, and I'm always chirping, I talked to Sandy McDonald with the Grande Prairie Public School District about hey, we should have greenhouses at school programs, and we should work that into the curriculum, because you can teach photosynthesis, you can teach kids life skills that they can go home with the product and share the fruits with their family,
your home ec, and how to cook a meal.
And you could do it on a big scale too, or you could have every school have a greenhouse project and then have them all get together at the farmers market and put it back into the local economy and build it into something bigger. And then they would see
work experience,
the whole 9 yards. Yeah, it becomes a bigger program. So if every school did it, got to the farmers market, you would see that kind of from the dirt to the table, and this is what it looks like.
In the city, so cemented in the agriculture world that
we have best soils in the world too.
Huge amount of support for that.
I have a greenhouse. I love growing things, man.
Oh, it's so good.
It's kind of a zen
you got a garden in the back.
I grow peppers.
Yeah,
I grow some other things too, but mostly peppers. I make salsa, and that's kind of my jam.
Yeah,
cool. But I've grown other things.
Salsa too. Jam, I like that.
His hot bastard salsa is legendary every fall.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, I can't wait to try some here.
It can be pretty nuclear some years.
Do you see how this goes though? Like, so, I bring up, maybe we should have greenhouses at schools. And then, I share that idea with you. And then you say, well, maybe we get all the schools together and then we start selling at the farmers market. We start supporting the local economy. This is how ideas grow. Like, it's because we take the time to share those ideas, to be connected, that, we just build off of each other. And that's what's so important for humanity in general, especially nowadays where they're trying to keep us so far apart.
I didn't think anyone...
Just tweeting at each other from the comfort of our own living room.
I hate you because you like Donald Trump.
Not watching.
Orange Man bad.
While we're ignoring the Netflix we're paying $24 a month for.
I didn't think I'd ever be this fired up about municipal politics, but I'm in. Fuck it.
It's good, man. It's I've said it since year 2 as a municipally elected councillor. In fact, I even said it to Justin Trudeau himself. You have the power to make a difference if you have a seat at the table of municipal government. You always have a chance to make a difference, but to have a voice at the table, that puts, for you at least for 4 years, right at the heart of everything. And the cool thing about municipal government is, 1, we don't have parties yet.
Yep.
2, we don't have parties, so we don't have a whip. So nobody's telling you have to vote a certain way. You can vote with your conscience. You can vote for what you think is best for the community.
Yeah.
And when we vote on things, unlike the provincial or the federal entities, they're usually just voting on big budget items, right? And then they splash that out everywhere. And they're like, yeah, this is our transit. This is our green trip funding, So they send that out that way. Whereas when we vote on something, for instance, like on Monday, we're going to be discussing and debating putting 135,000 square foot FIFA-sized soccer dome in the north end of town. So that's a $20 million project, right? Now, we know there's a big need for covered like field sports.
Yeah, field access.
Yeah, but we also have to weigh and balance that out here, right? Like, okay, well, do we have the road space? Can everybody use it? Is it accessible? Like, can people get on the free transit, for instance, and just go to their soccer play? Because it is kind of out there on the outskirts of town. It will be a community asset. It will open up other field space that isn't covered across the city for soccer and football and lacrosse and all those other cool sports. But it's still a $20 million investment. At the end of the day, regardless of whatever council decides on, we're either going to look at an empty piece of land that's going to be developed one day into something that council voted on, or within the next 6 to 12 months, we're going to see a giant soccer dome and hear kids running around screaming, playing, having fun in it, right? So you actually get to see the fruits of your labor, the product of your vote.
I did have one quick question on you said there's 8 councillors plus a mayor. Is it broken up in the city by somebody's represents a certain part of the city?
Like wards?
Yeah, like wards. Is it broken up like that?
No, it's all at large. So
okay.
Yeah, which I think is actually really good. If it was a ward system, I might not have made it on council, and B, if I did, I wouldn't have had the mentorship that I would have had with having Helen Rice sit on council with me for my first term.
Okay.
Right. And she was so pivotal, and such a good friend of mine when she was here. If we had a ward system, essentially the year I got elected, you would have had to choose between a really bright and sharp former municipal intern who knew municipal government, was passionate about provincial government and advocacy, Rory Tarrant. So the upcoming former president of the Students Association at the GPRC. You have the old dog, Helen Rice, who tells it like it is, everybody knows and they're cool with her. Or this new guy with hand-painted signs that, did a bunch of music festival stuff and other community projects.
Yeah.
Okay. So it would have been tough. And we would have, all three of us got elected. So we would have lost perspective from sort of closing the borders in.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
That's interesting. It seems like our I wasn't aware of that our city seems to have a little bit more of a holistic approach to choosing choosing council rather than dividing things by sector or by party. And you do see that in bigger cities where those things tend to become those really contentious issues. It's not about the policies or what's good for the city. It's, well, this person's in and they're in the wrong party this week, and or this person's looking after the part of town that's all the wealthy people are in and they're not caring about the inner city and that. So it's interesting. I didn't realize that Grande Prairie kind of had more of an open, more holistic.
Actually, I'm glad to hear it because it means that every councillor represents the entire city.
Yeah. And so we don't hide out in our neighborhoods.
Yeah.
And the cool thing is no, it's all cool. I really think that with the general public and how I've seen elections, even before I was on council, when you see names like, well, I knew Bill and I've known him since we were in high school together, but guys like Dan Wong, Helen Rice, Lauren Radburn, the community kind of knows. Now, maybe that's a sort of a symptom of 21% voters.
Sure.
The people who really are in tune with the city are definitely going to go out and vote. And maybe some of the people who are like maybe just here for the money or has their 2-year plan and they're on year 3 and thinking, well, I kind of like it here. Maybe they're not getting out there to vote either. But it's, I think, definitely the connected people. And definitely people who see the value in local leadership. And, if the bottom of the whole world fell out, let's say Canada fell apart, the provinces fell apart, everything, I feel like we're pretty blessed to be in an area like the Peace region, like right in the center of it, where if we needed to, we could really just draw it right into the borders, draw our borders right in, call it the Peace region, and we could take care of everybody here. And not saying that that's the goal, but that's what I believe about the heart of the people here, and
that's interesting. The number of people who've sat in that chair who've made that exact same sentiment, coming from very, very diverse backgrounds and differing viewpoints.
Yeah.
All of them feel, like you said, blessed to be here. I think that was one of the things that the pandemic really opened up people's eyes on is, guess what? It does matter what kind of town or city that you live in and who's in charge of it and how engaged you are with it. Because I think it was a different ride regionally all over the world when it came down to what kind of support structure do you have? Are the people who are in charge, are they listening to the citizens? And do we have that level of measured discourse instead of, some mayor or some other elected official who's just top down deciding what's going to happen? I think a lot of people were, in hindsight, very, very thankful that they lived here. And I think you see that where in a situation like the pandemic, or like I said, where you're seeing a lot of disruption in the world, if locally, you've got good leadership, you got people who are willing to listen, you got transparency, there's a whole lot less anxiety that's happening where things are being addressed that need to be addressed. Like when you said, you started looking at things like the suicide rate during COVID.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a huge thing that not a lot of people looked at. They were looking at the big ticker at the bottom of the thing about how many billions of people they said died during the whatever. But when it comes down to how's it actually affecting people, how's the price of, like you said, how is our tax base really affecting people? Mm-hmm. Is this program really what we need? I think if people were a little bit more connected to their local government, to their local city council, to how the inner workings, because I don't think it's magic, right? I went on the website yesterday. It's pretty all plain, but it's not big and sexy like international politics or even provincial politics, but that's where the rubber meets the road.
Well, this is where you're going to build your quality of life, right? So if your local leadership is self-serving, for instance, rather than community-focused, right? If they get elected and they're like, yes, I've been elected to rule, rather than, awesome, I've been elected to serve my people and do the best for my community. Hopefully those are the people that we get from all stripes, from the business community, arts, environment, wherever they come from. Hopefully they all have that community focus, right? But yeah, when you have that, it really makes a difference in how the community comes together, how the community, is willing to accept things maybe that they wouldn't normally. Like, for instance, I'll just throw one out there. Our Grande Prairie Police Service.
Yeah.
I know that got a lot of pushback, but I'm a big believer. And I think part of the reason why I got pushback is because I think, I don't like to say that council made a mistake. Not to do the police would have been a mistake to not look into it. I think the local police service was something that, that can serve Grande Prairie a whole heck of a lot better than what we might have had with the RCMP in those relationships there. But I think the mistake that our council made, and I think it contributed to a bit of community anxiety, is that we had been so into it for so long, almost 3 years, over 3 years. By the time we were ready to make a decision, most members of council were ready to make a decision. So the fact that so many members of the community came forward at the 11th hour,
right?
That's uncomfortable, because I think most councils said, okay, well, we're very educated about this now, and we think it's going to be a good thing, so let's go do it. The problem was, is that, and I think this is where the mistake happened, is that we should have taken a pause at that 11th hour when we had a captive audience, when we had thousands of people looking at us, right? And we could have said, okay, we're going to pause this for 3 weeks, and we're going to have 3 open houses. We're going to tell you what we know. We're going to tell you why we're thinking about doing this, and we're going to tell you why we're going there, right?
Yeah.
And you know what? It might not have made everybody happy, but at least everybody would have known better.
More communication's never a bad thing.
Yeah, it really did seem like the first time I heard about it, I was like, what? This is happening? Like, it was the first time I'd heard about it, and it was going to happen right away. It wasn't, you say that city council had
We had consulted. Yeah, we did at least 8 to 10, I would say.
Yeah, and I just wonder if sometimes the message doesn't get out. And I wonder if that's kind of just symptomatic of municipal politics. You talked about the people in the city, wow, they're just here, they're on year 3 of their 2-year plan.
Yeah.
Fucking guilty as charged, man. I came here in 2003. We were going to come up here for 5 years. And now my kids have grown up here. This is home. I don't see myself leaving anytime soon.
Yeah.
And I'm just now in the last, I would say 6 or 7 years, getting more and more interested in municipal politics. Who's running the city? Where the hell is my tax dollars going? Like, that stuff matters to me now. Is that a topic that comes up at the city council level? Like, hey, how do we get more voter turnout and get people more engaged in municipal politics, especially in a city like Grande Prairie where people come here to work? It's a very transient population sometimes. Like, how do you engage and capture that and make sure that they matter? Like, is that kind of a...
No, that's 3 terms on council. That's a topic of conversation. And how do we engage better, right? So for instance, just in the police transition, I said we had 8 to 10 public engagements, but I don't think there was, at least I went to 3 of them, and there was no more than 6 people at all those ones, right? So we weren't capturing them. At that point, we had everybody. The whole community was turning us. We had a 15-hour and 1-day meeting, right, to talk about this transition. There's very heated debates going on. And so we had everybody looking at us. And I think that's maybe an opportunity that we should have grasped onto because, it would have saved everybody time. I mean, I fielded, because I was the only guy that voted against it, I fielded, probably over 200 phone calls.
I suppose.
And so at the same time, the decision's made.
Yeah.
Like that says so in the Municipal Government Act. When the decision's made, like you can't throw your council under the bus, essentially. You got to say, well, this is what council decided. Mm-hmm. You have to be very clear that this is your opinion, right? But I see the merits of a local police service. So you're balancing somebody's anger over a decision that council made, and they're leaning on you as a person on council that agrees with them because they voted no. But this person on council, like myself, also sees the good stuff of what a local police service could provide for the community, right? So you try to talk about that. You try to address their concerns. You share their concerns, right? Like at least I did. And then right off the hop, I guess you go, I've been all over the province, so I asked a whole bunch of people about this. Now, some councillors say, don't tell them about the petition, right? But that's a mechanism that we have as a municipality that the locals can use. It's hard to achieve in a city like Grande Prairie, but they can overturn our decisions, within a few weeks of us making those decisions, simply by getting 10% of the entire population. And they all have to be legal age. So that's tricky because if you're thinking you got
7,000 18-year-olds that have the right to vote.
Yeah, exactly. And then you get them to sign, this is my address, this is my phone number. So then we have to do all the work. But that still doesn't make us do anything. It just makes us bring it back to the table and reconsider it. Right. And then we could still make the same decision. But that was part of what, from people, I need to stop this. How do we stop this? I'm like, well, here's what you can do.
Yeah, there is a mechanism.
There's a mechanism, but it's very hard, and you have a very small amount of time to do it in.
Yeah.
But we have all of that posted on the City of Grande Prairie website. If anybody is really mad at us about something they want us to change, and they think they can get 10,000 signatures, I
can imagine that there's somebody mad at you guys for something all the time.
Usually, that's fair. It's all part of it. We don't agree on everything as humanity, right?
No.
And we could all sit around here and talk about who our favorite sports teams are. I bet you. We might have the same one, but I don't know.
Yeah, and if it did, it would be a really bad league because you'd have one team.
That's right.
Yeah, right. We don't want a league of one team.
No, and we don't want one team to win all the time either.
No, we got that's the good thing when we talk about diversity. It's diversity of thought.
Yeah,
right. Where we can all think something different, and I'm not a big fan of government in any way, shape, or form, but I believe that you do have to have a framework to kind of keep everybody moving in the same direction. Where we as a community, we get together, we kind of decide where the guardrails are.
Yeah.
We decide like don't go too far this way, don't go too far this way. We're all going to try and move in this direction. And along the way, we're going to run into problems. We're going to have to figure out how we're going to deal with this problem, how we're going to deal with that problem. We're also going to need people who are, your nuts and bolts people.
Yeah.
People who are going to look at that problem and go, we can fix this with engineering, or we can fix this with science, or we can fix this with social science. And you're going to need people who are visionaries. We're going to be like, hey, I think we should go down this way, 10 years, 20 years, 50 years down the road, and see that big, wide open potential. And then you got to have people who are looking at the needs of now, right? Like what are we going to do with, this particular issue that we're running into? I guess one of my questions is, when you're looking at your career in politics, and could you believe you had a career and have a career in politics?
I don't even call it. Here's the thing. And I don't want to cut off the question, but people always say, hey, your career, your politics.
Yeah.
My Reddit fan fiction base, I like to call them my fan fiction base. They like to, anyways, they will say, oh, he's killing his career right now with some of the things he's posting. Well, no, I never viewed this as a career. I viewed this as an opportunity to help make my community better, which I love, right? I had ideas to present and to bring forward, and somehow I ceded consent for most of my ideas to happen, like the 10 that I set out to do. So I was very, very blessed to do that. But, man. Okay, sorry. Go on with your question.
No, I get it. I get it. I like the sidebar because it strikes me as again, like for a lot of people who sat in that chair, and how we ended up, all three of us sitting here, is following curiosity.
Yeah.
Is following something where it was like, because I had a friend of mine during COVID, and we were sitting around just like this. We were drinking beer in my basement, and he said, you should have a podcast. And I'm like, that's a dumb idea. And then 6 months later, I'm drawing up podcast ideas. How could I? Why not? Right?
Why not?
Why not? So here we are, and it became that. Well, what drives it? Is what drives anybody to do anything? Curiosity.
Yeah.
What would happen if I did this?
Yeah.
And what vision would it have? Well, that didn't really start off with something. I had no idea. But I'm like, I write a lot of this stuff. I write, a full piece of poetry every day, and I have for 8 years.
Awesome.
So I have a lot of it.
Yeah.
So I started publishing books, and I'm like, well, I can use a framework of read one piece, and maybe it stimulates some conversation. Maybe it breaks the ice. Maybe we get something going. And a lot of the people who I want to talk to are people who maybe didn't end up in the place they thought they were going to in the beginning. Maybe they ended up in a place that other people didn't think they were going to get to. But those people, in my mind, those are the interesting people. That's who I want to talk to, is people who saw a need or had some kind of crazy left field idea and just decided to go after it. Because I think that's at least for me, that's the interesting part of the whole thing. Those are the interesting stories.
And in municipal government, that's the difference between being a politician and being a community leader, right? Like leadership, It isn't born out of any kind of need to have any side of one argument represented more than the other. It's representing to the best interest of the community going forward.
And both of those, monikers come with various tags that people are going to hang on.
Sure.
You hear somebody's a community leader or community organizer, you might think one way. You might hear somebody who's a politician, you're definitely going to think one way, right? I think we're all in there. But is there any legacy that you wanted to leave behind? Like you're approaching into your, going for your fourth term. At the tail end of this, when you decide one day to hang it up, is there any, notch on the wall, somewhere you want to hit, some high water mark where you say, if I walk away from this thing, at least I can say I did X?
And preemptive question, is there term limits in municipal government?
No.
Okay.
No. Okay, so this is going to sound weird for somebody who's going to throw his name in the hat again in the election. Is when I look back on my time spent in municipal government, I'm very proud of what I've been able to accomplish, how I've been able to network ideas and bring people together from diverse backgrounds and thoughts. Right. I had 10 goals when I started to be a municipal councillor.
Yep.
That was the 10 goals. I've done 8 of them, and they weren't small goals, like create an edible landscaping policy, build 300 affordable houses in the community over, I said it would take at least 2 terms. Well, here we are, 3 terms. We've done it. From expanding and connecting the trail system, planting more trees should be easy, right? But the 12 years I spent on council, we've planted more trees than every other council combined since the 1950s. Oh, wow. So that's a pretty cool thing. I didn't think we were going to do all that. Now, a lot of these are tree replacements and stuff like that. And certainly when you're developing, you're ripping up more trees than you're planting.
Sure.
So as Grande Prairie was growing, that was happening. But it's still something that we can feather in our cap and say, hey, you know what?
Yep.
These trees are going to provide something so much better for people down the road. So I feel, and we talked about free transit, all sorts of stuff. So I feel pretty fortunate that I was able to get that consent. I've started so many times on different issues as a 1 to 8 on council, where I was the only person. And, some people pat themselves on the back and go, I got so many 1 to 8s. I'm so different. Well, the way I look at it is like, okay, 1 to 8, we got work to do, right?
Yeah.
I know this is a good thing, and I just need to find a better way to find consensus amongst my peers. And so that's how we went from, and sometimes the world jumps in too, but that's how we started building homes as a municipality, when usually that was the province and the federal government's purview. That's why we created the first in the world edible landscaping policy. That's why we have transit. Sometimes it's timing, sometimes it's people. Yep. But when I look back on it, the only 2 things I haven't done is take the fluoride out of the water and open up the leisure center. Now, the leisure center is never going to happen again.
It's gone.
It's gone, right?
But there's room for another facility in Grande Prairie.
And if we want lots of taxes, we can definitely build it or try to build it tomorrow. Yeah. But the reality is, you have to live sometimes within your means, And so when I look back on it now, and when I look forward to the municipal election, I'm hoping that we get a good group of people to either sit with me or replace me, because I want the best people running the city of Grande Prairie. And I think the citizens, they already know most of the time anyways, and they usually pick the best team, maybe not best for me, but the best team for the community. And so if I can prep that, great. If I get reelected, I think I just take on another leadership role and help bring up the new generation, the next generation of council. There's still things within the things I've already accomplished that I can make better. Like I've been pushing for a more efficient transit system by having an express bus go each way around the city and do the loops through all the big spots, not doing all the little stops. So there's stuff like that. Advocacy for the greenhouses we talked about, maybe to the province to start building that into their schools. I mean, a little $350,000 greenhouse that can support a school of 600 kids, is probably a small thing in the grand scope of the $12.5 million budgets that they usually use to sometimes $30 million to build these schools, right? So that's a small add-on. So there's lots of things that we can do, and sometimes people are going to come to the table with great ideas. So how can I help them make those possibilities happen for everybody here too? So
right,
that's a legacy.
Well, I think you've done a great job of explaining, where you sit and what your role has been as a city councilor, and definitely opening my eyes as to kind of what that role plays. And like I said, if I had any agenda going into this conversation, it was hopefully anybody that listens to this has a little bit more of an idea of what a city councilor does, and has a little bit more of an idea that they do have a say, that their voice matters. I think like you say, we get so disconnected. I don't believe we're as disconnected as we're led to believe we are.
No.
I think there's some power plays at play that would like us to believe that we're all very, very divided and at other sides or at odds on all sorts of stuff. And I don't really believe we are that much.
I don't either.
I think when we sit down, we have conversations like this. What's important to everybody is roughly the same stuff. And, on that municipal level, if anybody hears this and they think, hey, look, maybe I could come forward with my idea, or maybe I've seen a concern that I don't think there's really getting the attention it deserves, that they can come forward with it. Or if they, have the courage to come forward and say, hey, maybe I'm the guy or girl or whatever. Maybe I'm the person who wants to come forward and stand up for what I believe and help lead this thing or learn how. Because I'm going to guess that you didn't have the skills you have now when you started.
Oh, definitely not. I hate to say that I knew it all, but everybody goes in thinking that they know how it runs, right? Mm-hmm. And the learning curve is like this. It's like this. So I'll take this time, since we're early enough in the year, to say if there is anybody out there considering a run for council, now's the time to reach out to any member of council. And that's the difference that you're going to get compared to an MLA or an MP, is that your councillors, there's always at least one of us available for a conversation. And we can have these conversations like we are right now, sitting here now. So that would help whoever had any extra questions, maybe answer those questions, right? And so that accessibility to leadership is so important in municipalities. And I think it doesn't get enough credit, Each and every one of us are more than willing to meet with any member of the community, as long as they're not shouting out death threats at you.
Oh, for sure. Hey, when is the election this year, the municipal election? When does that happen?
Yeah, it's in October.
October, right?
Yeah. I'm trying to remember. Sometimes the 20th, sometimes the 18th. It's on a Monday. That's when it usually happens. So
right.
Yeah. The exact date is eluding me at the moment, but
okay, fair enough.
18th or 20th, whatever the Monday is. Yeah.
And I'm sure it's available on the City of Grande Prairie.
It definitely would be. Yeah.
So just to wrap up, is there anything questions that we didn't ask you that you feel you need to answer?
No, I think we went around the table pretty good.
One quick question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Got my notes here. It also says you were the vice chair of the John Howard Society. I'm just wondering, what is that? Yeah,
okay. So I guess I got to explain some of this to some people. So some people watching online, I'm going to explain this. So I haven't updated my City of Grande Prairie bio, and there's a reason behind that. So I went, you probably know, I went to Ottawa during the time of the Freedom Convoy just to see what was actually happening there. What side of the story is right, wrong, whatever, and videotape it. It was on my Facebook. I haven't even watched the videos. I know in some of them I was probably yelling freedom, but you get caught up in the moments, especially when everyone's waving the Canadian flag and they're so kind.
I'm not, in my mind, there's never a wrong time to yell freedom.
Yeah, no, never. So here's what happened is it was still relatively early in our election term. And so when I came back, I had a lot of people who didn't agree with me going down there. I don't know if it's the majority or not. I don't think it's the majority, but some of these people were really, really loud. And so at the time, I'd been asked by the Mental Wellness Matters Society to shoot a 10-minute video that they were going to present to all the kids in all the school districts, like grade 9 through 12, about mental health. And my portion of it was on mindfulness. So I did a 10-minute video on mindfulness and what it means to me. I didn't get paid for it. I didn't get anything. But as they were promoting it, they put my face on the poster. And then there was people out of Napa. I'm not going to name them. I'll tell you guys after. But anyways, out of Napa, they didn't like me. And they're not the coolest people in the world. And you guys will understand later when I tell you. But anyways, they started calling the school districts. And they called the sponsors. And they called the Mental Wellness Matters Society. And the whole cancel culture stuff.
Yes.
They were trying to cancel culture me for being a domestic terrorist, participating in an occupation that was illegal in the capital of our country. Right. Now, that's some people's viewpoints. The courts have spoken, and what I saw is what the courts have spoken on, that it was a totally legal protest.
Yeah.
But I'd never had that happen to me before. I'd never been used as a blunt force object against something. Right? I've never been weaponized. And for somebody who loves peace so much and loves people so much, this is a hard thing for me to reconcile. So one of the ways that I reconciled with that is I just now, when not-for-profits ask me to MC or participate or do a little speech, I say, sure, I'll do it, but you can't advertise me. Okay. And I did the same thing because I don't need somebody's political angst getting in the way of good business, of doing good business. Well, I don't like you because I think you're this, Right. So I'm going to go after everything else around you to try to cut you out. So for me, it was like a defense mechanism. So you're saying, well, you're vice chair. of Mighty Peace. No, I'm the chair, but I haven't updated that because maybe if somebody knew I was the chair of Mighty Peace Watershed Alliance, we have a small staff there, but they don't need to be monitoring who's calling and blocking phone numbers and taking
100%.
Complaints that are frivolous, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I do that. I'm pretty guarded with my personal life too. It doesn't always work in my current relationship, but I've usually tried to keep my family out of the business of politics. But yeah, that's how it goes. So
cool.
Yeah. Did I answer your question fairly?
Yeah, no, it's good.
Sometimes us guys, we tend to talk around the issue rather than
I appreciate that. Like I say, I just kind of did a quick skim of your bio and just had some questions jotted down.
Yeah. So, John Howard. Yeah, I didn't answer your question. So, I've been a part of the John Howard Society of Grande Prairie for 10 years now. And through that, I was also elected / nominated to be the representative of John Howard, Alberta. And then at John Howard, Alberta, I was elected / appointed by that board to be the Alberta representative at John Howard, Canada.
Okay. So what do they do?
It's all about social justice. So really, locally, every John Howard has their own types of programs, but it all centers around social justice and social and reformation of the justice system. So we try to take, like at least locally, we take youth who are maybe not fitting into the school system. And we have the Tabino Center where they can kind of do their school on their time, but they also have a group of like-minded individuals, so they're not just wayward,
it's a
walking down the
mentorship
street,
program,
kind of like that. And then we have actual school teachers that are there. We also do counseling services, for people who are entering into domestic violence or have been involved in domestic violence. So this is the men. So how do we heal those men?
Now that you're talking about it, I am familiar with it.
And at the higher levels, like in Alberta and Canada, we deal a lot with what happens in the justice system. And that's where social justice comes in, because we know that there's a overrepresentation of First Nation people. And when you go east, Black people. Yeah. So there's a strong prejudice. I don't like to use the word racism because I think we're all part of the human race. I think we're all just different shades of brown. That's my opinion, but whatever, we're all human.
Some of us are pretty white. I don't know.
I know. It's a very pale brown.
I didn't get any paler, man.
Yeah, no.
Actually, no, I know two people that are like ghosts.
Yeah, no, I know a couple. I know a couple like that too. But so this is all about, okay, well, why is this being represented, and how can we better address the law, so that these types of things aren't happening, that we don't have that over-representation, that we don't find guilty pleas because we've just looked at a certain segment of a culture and said, oh, well, you're definitely criminal, right?
Right.
A lot of this is based off of our own prejudices.
And what in society is causing that group of people to be
100%,
marginalized.
Right.
And life in the prison system, how you transfer out, group homes, stuff like that. So it's all really good work.
Nuanced,
okay, cool.
Piece of responsibility that, I'm. It's kind of funny because I'm not a big, huge, like I said, I'm not a big government guy. I'm not huge on kind of how police forces are used from time to time. But the justice system is one of those things that, like any system, if it's not closely monitored, if it's not looked after by the people, it will eventually turn against the people, because the nature of the power structure is just to get more power.
Yep.
And that's why people got to watch out for it. You need people who are guardians, who are going to look after, we got to look after each other. Because the system
100%.
is not built to look after us.
No.
It's built to run like a system. And the more power we give it, the more power it'll want.
Yeah, that is true. And we've seen lots of examples of that over the past few years.
Yeah.
Sure did.
And it's interesting. I see, like you said, about the Peace Country being a special place and Grande Prairie being a unique community. I definitely see that. And I was doing a little bit of reading here this morning on some Grande Prairie history. It's something I kind of wanted to get into for a while.
Cool.
And we have a really unique history up here in northwestern Alberta. Even though we're not like fully north, we're kind of somewhere in the middle. But there's not a whole lot north of here as far as once you get past like Peace River, it's a lot of muskeg.
Yeah,
a lot of black spruce all the way to the tundra. But I got this from the South Peace Historical Society.
Yeah, and
I read this little article on Grande Prairie, and there's a little piece, one paragraph that jumped out to me.
Okay,
and it was it says, it was also in the year of 1914 that the citizens discussed forming a local board of trade. As the Herald editorialized, we are, as a village, fast shedding our youthful appearance. Our public business affairs and responsibilities are each month becoming greater. Therefore, it is only proper that our affairs should be handled by those more directly interested in the town than in the country at large. So even back in 1914, the citizens of Grande Prairie decided, no, we got to look after this and not worry about what's going on out east. Let's not worry about what's going on in Edmonton. Let's focus on the community.
Yeah, pioneer spirit.
Let's focus on us. Yeah. And they're talking about that growth. They're talking about the burgeoning city of Grande Prairie, and this is over 100 years ago. And, if you take that and apply it to today, I don't think there's a whole lot of difference.
No. We carry the energy that we started with, right? So we go through these phases where, we grow. And sometimes the growth is slightly unmanageable. That's what we talked about at the top of this. What's the biggest issue facing Grande Prairie? It's the same issue that we're facing in 1915. It's the same issue we're facing in 2000. It's the same issue that we're facing today is the growth. And Grande Prairie, trust me, I think one day we're going to be looking at probably the third largest city, and we're going to call it, we're not going to call it a mid-sized city anymore. We're going to call it a charter city.
Yeah. Yeah. The other interesting thing that I got out of this article is right at the beginning where it said, from the earliest Northwest Company traders, the open sweep of isolated frontier was known as the Buffalo Plains. And that's so much of a cooler name than Grande Prairie. We could have been Buffalo Plains.
Right.
Yeah. But some French priest was like, La Grande Prairie, and that's how we got the name.
I think we just need to go a bit harder on the E. Grande Prairie.
Well, I know it is what it is. I think we got a decent name for ourselves. I mean, what's in a name, right?
Yeah.
But I don't know. Buffalo Plains is pretty good.
Sounds pretty good to me. Yeah. That would have been my second choice.
Yeah.
Maybe my first choice back in the day.
For sure, right?
Yeah, I had no idea. But I think that's it for us, man. I don't think I got any other questions for you.
Yeah.
Other than you're running in 2025, and
2025.
We'll definitely see you around.
I'll be around. My signs will be around. Hey, but before I let you go, I brought a little book here. It's a little piece of history. Yeah, I know you start with poetry, and that's all I knew about this program, except Mel Sigaco was on it, and that you guys start with poetry. I picked a poem today. It's
absolutely actually
quite in line with.
Would love to hear it.
With your Daffodil poem.
Okay.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. So here we go. Talking about hope, eh? Here we go. I'm stuck on something here. One sec.
Oh, you can unhook it from
there. We go.
Yeah. Cable management.
Let's see. What do we got here? So this is my old scrapbook from the Peace Starts at Home days. You can see, I don't know, how some of the poster making went back in the day. But this song, or I guess not a song, poem, is one that I wrote during, I think it was 2008, and I called it A Child Wonders. And it was just based off of a conversation that I was having with my 2-year-old son, who kept asking me, what's this? What's this? What's this? Like all kids do.
Yeah.
So it goes like this. A child wonders, what is this? Grass on my feet. What is this? Stars bright to greet. What is this? Snow from the sky. What is this? To know, reply. A child wonders in this world, be it a boy or be it girl. Splendid mysteries all abound, growing knowledge of all around. But when the children are full grown, and supposedly all is known, what is this? Fades to gray. Wrinkled skin, youth fades away. And grass from feet grows concrete. Stars are hidden in clouds discreet. Snowflakes weathered in disdain. And what we know is all from vain. It doesn't have to be this way, for love is in each single day. In your heart, a child does play, with answers coy, and you're right to say. A child wonders, what is this? As do you, stray not amiss. Child Wonders by Chris Thiessen.
I love it, man.
Wow.
I love it.
Well, thank you.
Reading that.
Thanks, guys. I really appreciate you having me here today. This is a great conversation.
Wild. Really appreciate you coming.
Yeah, man. I guess the only thing else that I'd have to say is just stay curious, man. Keep following your heart, man. It seems to be leading you in the right direction.
Well, thanks so much. Yeah, I'll do that.
We consider ourselves apolitical here on the Grande Range podcast, but I'm going to tell you, vote for Chris. So you can find the podcast on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcast, and CastBox. You can help us grow the channel by giving us a thumbs up, commenting, subscribing. All that stuff helps feed the algorithm. You can also find us on Instagram, X, Facebook, and check out our website at thegrange.com, where you can find every episode of the podcast, as well as merch like these cool t-shirts we're wearing, and whatever else we have. And obviously you can find the new book, Whiskey Painted Holocaust, the blog.
Yeah, we actually have new stuff up on the blog. I actually put a new piece up on there the other day. Obviously, I write a new piece every day, so there'll be a lot more coming. And thank you guys for spending some time with us.
Cool. I'll look for that.
Grande Range podcast. Out.
Peace.